In my 1K Q&A, I said this. I even remember one of my favorite assessments was doing a presentation, a mini analysis in front of my class on the escape scene from Curse of the Black Pearl. In fact, I might still have that presentation somewhere. Maybe I can dig it back up and redo it for this channel. And since I'm falling behind schedule by a week, I figured why not do that now? The original presentation for uni was kind of bloated with useless information that I crammed in to make it suit the marking criteria better, so I've more or less written a new script to create a more focused analysis. So without further ado, let's analyze the scene depicting the time they almost caught Captain Jack Sparrow. We start where any good escape scene does, with our protagonist in a situation from which they need to escape. Commodore Norrington and the British Royal Navy have Jack cornered. The wide shot of this initial interaction sees Jack surrounded, not only immediately by Murtaugh and Mulroy, but on the other side of the frame we have Norrington himself and the bayonet blades of the soldiers' muskets cornering our main character. Even Jack's close-up shot conveys how isolated he is, only barely containing a small rowboat that will become symbolically important later. In contrast, Norrington's reverse shot has no less than 5 soldiers standing behind him, asserting his physical dominance. The Commodore further seeks to corner Jack in a more psychological sense. He firstly questions his title of captain, but Jack brushes this off. So he begins criticizing each of the items that he had on him. The pistol with 1 shot, the compass that didn't point north. Even when he finds the sword that has nothing wrong with it, he finds a way to degrade Jack further. However, this psychological battery does not work. Norrington seeks to deliver the final blow. "You are without doubt the worst pirate I've ever heard of," to which an unfazed Jack wittingly replies, "But you have heard of me." Having failed to assert dominance verbally, Norrington returns to physicality, moving him by force through his soldiers and having him physically restrained. Elizabeth Swann protests Jack's arrest, moving confidently through the soldiers, 4 of which stand in the foreground visually resembling bars, like that of a jail cell that Jack will soon face, but also that Elizabeth feels as though define her life as well. Keep in mind that dressing the way society expected her to had just put her life in danger, and Jack rescuing her is what has put him into this very situation. She stands between Jack and Norrington, physically shielding the man she is verbally defending. The reverse shot emphasizes just how insignificant Elizabeth is in this situation, by framing her as being eclipsed by these men who will not listen to her. Notice how in this next shot Jack is once again cornered, this time having his back directly to the edge of the frame. However, the running theme of Jack being cornered is subverted when he reaches out and takes Elizabeth hostage. Notice how this time, while there is still no one in his background, we do see a ship, a slightly bigger one than before. Ships in this film are a recurring symbol of freedom. Jack himself explicitly likens his own ship, the Black Pearl, to liberty. So it makes sense that within a shot that Jack is nearing his freedom, we see a larger vessel than the moment where his sovereignty was limited. Notice how when Elizabeth is putting Jack's belt and hat back on, this moment is portrayed with tight shots, having Elizabeth, Jack, or both taking up the entire frame. The filmmakers use this composition not only to express how physically close these characters are right now, but also to convey just how trapped Elizabeth is. Also notice that unlike before in the shot reverse shots between Jack and Norrington, one no longer appears in the same frame as the other. Before, the presence of Jack in Norrington's shots and vice versa showed that the two were close, or instead that Norrington was close to capturing Jack. But now there is a distance between them, one that is growing larger as Norrington ultimately loses his prisoner. Finally, as Jack backs away with Elizabeth in his grasp, he utters the iconic line that this very video is named after. "You will always remember this is the day that you almost caught Captain Jack Sparrow," before pushing her into the crowd of soldiers and beginning his escape. His escape begins by dropping a cannon, using the rope attached to it to get away from his pursuers. In my original presentation, I mentioned Hitchcock's rule being used in the shot of the cannon falling. For those of you who don't know, Alfred Hitchcock is one of the most influential and iconic filmmakers of all time. Hitchcock's rule dictates that the size of an object in a shot should be directly proportional to its importance. While this isn't an exact point of view shot, it is still a representation of what the soldiers see at that moment. Jack, the criminal they are trying to capture, is becoming smaller and eventually obscured in the shot as the cannon plummets onto their position, becoming more critical to the individual soldiers as it puts their mortal lives in peril. The wooden crane that Jack had tried to escape with begins to spin out of control, temporarily trapping our main character, but this does not interfere with his escape. Norrington gives the order to open fire, which leads to this brilliant shot. The red of the soldiers' uniforms come to represent aggression or animosity, while Jack swings against the blue sky, representing freedom. We get a quick glimpse of the soldiers' faces, and it becomes clear that looking into the bright sky has put them at a severe disadvantage. Most of them are struggling to see, and some even have their eyes closed. After getting off this crane, Jack uses the shackles that Norrington had intended to inhibit his freedom to assist in his escape. The Commodore, desperate to reclaim the prisoner he had in his custody seconds ago, gives the order on his heels. An idiom that describes following someone closely, or in this context, chasing someone. Too late to catch up, the soldiers open fire into a street with civilians, but Jack manages to escape regardless. This scene is brilliant. The framing of each shot further elaborates on what is happening in the story. The use of subtle symbolism and colours adds emotional context, and the verbal battle that Jack wins in a single phrase all create a scene that makes us realise what a genius Jack Sparrow is capable of being. As masterful as this scene is, there are several more with just as much detail that I would love to dig into at some point, if that's something you would be interested in seeing. But in the meantime, that is it for this scene analysis. I'd like to thank my patrons Orion Tran, Quincy Chamberlain, Gemman5, Lars Espen, Shark, Data52, Nerxu, and Pixcaliber. If you would like to be credited at the end of each video and support the channel in the process, consider becoming a patron yourself. Thank you all very much for watching, and I will see you next time.